There is a kind of heartbreak that does not end when the relationship ends. It follows you into quiet mornings, into late nights, into moments that should feel peaceful but somehow still feel heavy. It lingers in your chest when you hear a song, when you pass a familiar place, when your phone lights up, and for 1 second you wonder if it is them. Some breakups hurt because love was lost, but this kind of breakup hurts because closure was never given. You were left with confusion instead of answers, distance instead of honesty, silence instead of resolution. And when someone who once felt close suddenly becomes unreachable, the mind does something dangerous. It starts chasing what it cannot understand. You may have told yourself you should be over it by now. You may have tried distractions, new routines, talking to friends, pretending it no longer matters, but deep down something still pulls at you. Not always because you want them back, but because part of you still wants peace. Part of you still wants to know why it happened, why they changed, why they could seem loving one moment and cold the next. You replay conversations, you question yourself, you wonder if you could have done something differently, and all of that keeps the wound open. But today something changes. Today is not about getting them back. It is not about decoding their behavior or hoping they return transformed. It is about finally getting over them for good. It is about understanding why this pain feels so strong, why you have felt trapped inside it, and how to walk out of it with your dignity, your clarity, and your heart intact. Because healing does not begin when they apologize. Healing begins when you stop waiting. The hardest part to admit is that you are not only grieving the person, you are grieving the version of the future you imagined with them. You are grieving the moments that almost became something more. You are grieving the love you kept trying to reach but could never fully hold. And when someone gave you just enough connection to make you hope, but never enough consistency to make you feel safe, the loss feels deeper than most people understand. That is why you still cannot let go. It was never just a breakup. It was an emotional puzzle left unfinished. It was a story that stopped in the middle. It was affection mixed with distance, warmth mixed with withdrawal, closeness followed by confusion. Your heart does not know how to grieve what never fully made sense. You keep thinking if you understand it, you will be free. If you find the right explanation, maybe the pain will disappear. If they finally admit what happened, maybe you can move on. But freedom does not come from one more answer. It comes from accepting that some people create chaos because chaos lives inside them. And no amount of love from you could have turned confusion into security. The painful truth about these breakups is that they often hurt longer than openly toxic ones. Because when someone is clearly cruel, the mind knows what to reject. But when someone is distant yet sometimes loving, detached yet occasionally tender, unavailable yet never fully gone, the mind keeps searching for the good parts. It keeps saying maybe it was real, maybe it can return, maybe I gave up too soon. That uncertainty becomes its own prison. You do not cry every day because you lost perfection. You cry because you lost possibility. You lost what it could have been if they had met you fully. You lost the relationship you were constantly trying to build while they kept one foot outside the door. And that kind of grief is brutal because it asks you to mourn not only reality, but fantasy. Maybe they disappeared when things got serious. Maybe they shut down when emotions got deep. Maybe they said they cared, but their actions created loneliness. Maybe every time you reached for connection, you felt them pull away just enough to make you doubt yourself. If that happened, understand this now. Their inability to stay emotionally present was never proof that you were too much. It was proof that intimacy asked something from them they did not know how to give. Yet silence after the breakup can feel strangely addictive. You tell yourself you hate that they are gone, but part of you is still waiting, waiting for a message, waiting for an apology, waiting for the version of them who once seemed warm to return. And every day they stay silent, your nervous system stays activated. It is like standing at a locked door hoping it opens. This is why you check their profile. This is why your chest tightens when you think of them with someone else. This is why random memories hit you harder at night. It is not weakness, it is withdrawal. When love is inconsistent, the brain can become attached in a deeper and more painful way. Predictable affection creates safety. Unpredictable affection creates obsession. You were not addicted to them as a person as much as you became attached to the emotional highs and lows of trying to win closeness from someone who rarely gave it freely. Think about how often you felt relief when they finally texted after pulling away. Think about how powerful the smallest affection felt after days of distance. Think about how crumbs started to feel like a feast because you had been starved emotionally. That pattern trains the heart to celebrate scraps. And now in the breakup, your body still remembers that cycle. The silence creates anxiety. The tiny sign of attention creates hope. The hope keeps you stuck. This is why moving on feels harder than it should. You are not only healing from heartbreak, you are healing from conditioning. Many people stay trapped because they keep chasing closure from the very person who caused the wound. They want one honest conversation, one clear explanation, one final moment of understanding. But some people cannot give closure because they do not understand themselves deeply enough to offer it. They avoid discomfort, accountability, vulnerability, so they leave others carrying questions they never intended to answer. And while you wait for closure from them, your life remains paused. You think one message will free you, but often that message never comes. Or worse, it comes with just enough softness to reopen everything without changing anything. A casual check-in, a late-night hello, a sudden return once they feel lonely, and because your heart is still tender, you mistake contact for growth. Do not confuse their reappearance with transformation. Sometimes people come back because they miss access, not because they built capacity. They miss your attention, your warmth, your availability, your emotional safety. But missing what you provided is not the same as being ready to love you properly. This is why so many people get hurt twice. They think the return means the story has changed, but often only the timing has changed. The same fears, the same avoidance, the same inability to stay close remain untouched beneath the surface. And while all of this happened, you may have slowly turned against yourself. You blamed your needs. You questioned your worth. You wondered if asking for consistency was too demanding. You shrank your standards just to keep the connection alive. You accepted less and called it patience. You tolerated confusion and called it love. That stops now. Wanting communication was not too much. Wanting honesty was not too much. Wanting effort was not too much. Wanting to feel secure with someone who says they care was not too much. You were asking for the basics. The tragedy is that being deprived of basics can make normal needs feel excessive. So if you are sitting here today still carrying them in your chest, hear this clearly. You are not hard to love because someone emotionally unavailable could not meet you. You are not forgettable because they withdrew. You are not broken because this pain lasted longer than expected. You are healing from confusion. You are healing from mixed signals. You are healing from investing real love into someone who could only offer partial presence. And there is hope in that truth because confusion can be cleared. Mixed signals can be seen for what they were. Partial presence can lose its power once you stop romanticizing it. The first step to getting over them for good is not forcing yourself to stop caring overnight. It is seeing clearly what you were actually attached to. Was it stable love? Or was it potential? Was it peace? Or was it longing? Was it partnership? Or was it the dream that one day they would become the partner you needed? Be honest with yourself, because many hearts are not broken by what was, they are broken by what they kept hoping would be. And when you finally separate fantasy from reality, something inside you begins to loosen. The pedestal cracks, the illusion fades. The person who felt impossible to replace starts to look human again. Flawed, limited, unready, not evil perhaps, but not capable of giving what you deserved. That realization is painful, but it is also freedom. You do not need one more sign from them. You do not need one more explanation. You do not need to be chosen by someone who could not choose consistency. What you need now is to choose yourself so fully that the cycle cannot call you back. Because the moment you stop asking why they could not love you right is the moment you start learning how to love yourself right. And that is where real healing begins, because once the fog starts to lift, another truth rises with it. Missing them is not the same as needing them. Longing for what felt familiar is not proof that it was healthy. Pain has a strange way of dressing itself up as love, especially when the relationship trained you to survive on uncertainty. What you often miss most is not the person standing in front of you, but the emotional rhythm your heart became used to chasing. This is why the memories can feel so dangerous. Your mind rarely replays the nights you cried alone wondering why they changed. It rarely highlights the anxiety of waiting for messages, the confusion after mixed signals, the exhaustion of trying to decode someone who would not communicate clearly. Instead, it replays the smile that melted you, the conversations that felt deep, the moments they seemed soft and present, the times you believed this was finally becoming real. The mind edits pain when it wants relief. It selects the beautiful fragments and loops them until you begin to believe you lost something extraordinary. But healing asks a different question. Not what moments felt magical, but what patterns kept hurting you. Not how intense it felt, but how safe it felt. Not how badly you wanted it, but how consistently it loved you back. Many people stay trapped because they worship highlights and ignore habits. One affectionate weekend cannot erase months of emotional distance. One vulnerable conversation cannot cancel repeated withdrawal. One return does not rewrite a history of leaving. Yet when you are lonely, the mind bargains. It says maybe the good moments were the real them and the painful moments were temporary. But patterns are the truth. Consistency reveals character far more than chemistry ever will. So if you keep replaying the best memories, gently widen the frame. Remember the entire story. Remember how often your stomach tightened before your phone buzzed. Remember how your mood depended on their availability. Remember how often you silenced your needs to keep the peace. Remember how many times you accepted confusion because you feared losing them. Remember the version of yourself that was slowly disappearing while trying to hold on to them. This is not to make you bitter, it is to make you honest, because honesty breaks nostalgia's spell. And then comes another painful realization. You may still be blaming yourself for their distance. Deep down, you wonder if you were too emotional, too needy, too intense, too available, too honest, too invested. You may think if you had been calmer, prettier, less demanding, more mysterious, more patient, they would have stayed. But people who fear closeness often retreat when intimacy becomes real, not because you failed, but because genuine connection activates fears they already carried long before you arrived. They can enjoy romance while it is light, exciting, or distant. But when love asks for vulnerability, accountability, consistency, and emotional presence, they feel pressure where others feel bonding. You were not the cause of wounds you did not create. Read that again in your heart. You were not the cause of wounds you did not create. Someone who pulls away from closeness would likely have done the same with anyone who truly asked them to be present. They may have stayed longer with someone who asked for less, tolerated more, or never challenged their defenses, but that would not be love. That would be avoidance with better camouflage. Your standards exposed what their patterns could not sustain, and that is why being left can feel so insulting. You offered sincerity and were met with distance. You offered patience and were met with inconsistency. You offered depth and were met with walls. But rejection from someone emotionally unavailable is not a verdict on your value, it is evidence of their limitations. The next trap is one of the most dangerous, the fantasy that they will come back changed. Almost everyone caught in this kind of heartbreak has imagined it. The unexpected message, the sincere apology, the tears, the confession that losing you opened their eyes, the promise that this time will be different. The future where all your suffering suddenly makes sense because it led to the love you wanted all along. Fantasy is comforting because it delays grief. If they might come back transformed, then you do not have to fully let go today. If the story is unfinished, you can keep the door cracked open. If redemption is coming, your pain can still become reward. But while you wait for a changed version of them, you abandon the real version of yourself. Days pass, months pass, life passes. You compare every new possibility to someone who exists mostly in imagination now. You protect a shrine built from potential while your present life starves outside it. Can people change? Yes. Real change happens every day. But real change is rare when it is only inspired by loneliness, jealousy, or temporary loss. Genuine change requires deep self-confrontation, consistent effort, accountability, emotional skill building, and time. It is measured in patterns, not promises. In behavior, not words. In sustained presence, not dramatic returns. And even if they changed someday, your healing cannot depend on it. You cannot place your future in the hands of someone else's maybe. Another truth now deserves to be faced. They may have trained you to accept breadcrumb love, a little attention after long silence, a kind message after coldness, one intimate night after weeks of distance, small reassurance after repeated doubt. Just enough warmth to keep hope alive, never enough consistency to let peace grow. When someone gives love in fragments, the heart can become grateful for scraps. You start celebrating things that should have been standard. A returned call feels like devotion. Basic kindness feels like romance. Minimal effort feels like progress. You lower the bar so slowly you hardly notice it moving. Then after the breakup, your cravings are shaped by that same hunger. You do not dream of grand love. You ache for tiny things. One text, one sign they care, one moment of softness. That is how deeply deprivation can rewire desire. But you were not born to beg for emotional crumbs. You were not made to measure your worth by response times, mixed signals, or inconsistent affection. You were not meant to become smaller so someone else could remain emotionally comfortable. This next part matters deeply. No contact often feels cruel before it feels healing. When you stop checking, stop responding, stop monitoring, stop leaving the door open, your body may panic at first. You may feel emptier, lonelier, more restless. This is because silence removes stimulation, and withdrawal can masquerade as love. The absence of chaos may feel boring because chaos became familiar. Stay with it. There is a quiet on the other side of that discomfort that many people have never known. A morning where your first thought is not them. An evening where your chest is not waiting. A week where you did not check their profile once. A laugh that arrives naturally. A conversation where you feel seen, a version of yourself that is no longer orbiting someone unavailable. No contact is not punishment, it is protection. It creates the distance required for truth to become louder than longing. Every day without new confusion gives your nervous system a chance to settle. Every boundary you keep tells your self-respect that it matters. Every urge you survive proves that feelings are waves, not commands. And yes, some nights will still hurt. You may miss them most when you are tired, lonely, rejected elsewhere, or nostalgic for who you used to be before heartbreak hardened you. But missing someone in vulnerable moments does not mean they belong in your future. It means you are human. When those nights come, do not romanticize the wound. Hold yourself through it. Write what you wish you could say, then keep it unsent. List what actually happened, not only what you hoped would happen. Call someone safe. Walk outside. Cry if tears come. Pray if prayer helps. Sleep before making emotional decisions. Morning often restores truths that midnight distorts. And slowly, almost invisibly, something beautiful begins. You stop wanting to be chosen by someone who could not choose consistency. You stop admiring emotional mystery and start valuing emotional maturity. You stop calling anxiety chemistry. You stop confusing longing with love. You stop mistaking intensity for intimacy. You stop trying to earn what should be given freely. This is the turning point many never reach because they run back too soon. They mistake temporary pain for permanent truth. They assume discomfort means they need the person back, when often discomfort simply means the bond is loosening. Let it loosen. Let the version of you built around survival fall away. Let your standards rise where your desperation once lived. Let reality become more attractive than fantasy. Because every day you stop feeding the old cycle, you feed the new self waiting underneath it. The self who no longer needs mixed signals to feel alive. The self who can receive steady love without suspicion. The self who trusts peace. The self who knows that being wanted occasionally is not the same as being loved well. And when that self fully awakens, you will look back in disbelief that you once begged for what now feels unbearably small. That day is coming, not because they return, not because they apologize, not because they finally understand your worth, but because you finally do. And once that realization lands, healing enters a new stage. The pain is no longer only about them, it becomes about you, about the parts of you that were neglected while you were busy trying to be enough for someone else. About the confidence that slowly eroded each time your needs were dismissed, about the voice inside you that became quieter while anxiety became louder. Many people think heartbreak is only losing another person, but sometimes heartbreak is realizing how much of yourself you lost while trying to keep them. You may have become hyper-aware of every shift in tone. You may have monitored moods, words, timing, energy. You may have learned to sense distance before it was spoken. You may have shaped your behavior around preventing withdrawal. That kind of survival mode changes a person. It teaches you to focus outward instead of inward. It teaches you to read them while abandoning yourself. So now the real work begins, rebuilding the self-worth that got bruised in the process. Self-worth does not return all at once. It returns in moments. It returns the first time you say no without explaining yourself. It returns the first time you stop checking whether someone likes you and start asking whether you like them. It returns when you keep a boundary even though loneliness tempts you to lower it. It returns when you choose rest over obsession. It returns when you speak kindly to yourself after years of internal blame. It returns when you realize being left by one person did not reduce your value by even 1%. For a long time you may have treated their attention like proof you mattered. If they texted, you felt wanted. If they pulled away, you felt lacking. If they were warm, you felt safe. If they were cold, you questioned yourself. That is exhausting power to hand another human being. Take it back now. Your worth cannot be measured by someone else's capacity to recognize it. A blindfolded person cannot judge the beauty of the sunrise. Someone emotionally unavailable cannot accurately measure the depth of what you offered. There is a softer version of strength waiting for you. Not the kind that pretends not to care, but the kind that cares deeply without abandoning itself. The kind that can love and still walk away from inconsistency. The kind that can feel sadness without returning to harm. The kind that knows tenderness and boundaries can exist in the same heart. And as you rebuild, you may start noticing signs that you are finally breaking free. At first they are subtle. You go an entire afternoon without thinking of them. A song that once shattered you now simply plays. You hear their name and your body stays calm. You stop fantasizing about proving your worth. You no longer rehearse conversations that will never happen. You become curious about your future again. You laugh without guilt. You meet someone kind and notice how unfamiliar steadiness once felt. You begin protecting your peace more than chasing closure. These signs matter because healing is often quiet. It rarely arrives with fireworks. It arrives as less obsession, less urgency, less emotional charge, more space, more clarity, more life returning where grief once lived. Then comes one of the strangest truths in these stories. Sometimes they reappear when you move on. Just when your energy shifts, just when you stop checking, just when you begin glowing again, just when your heart starts opening elsewhere. A message appears, a reaction, a casual greeting, a memory shared, a vague attempt to reconnect. This confuses many people. They think, now they see my worth, maybe, but often something simpler is happening. When you stop chasing, the dynamic changes, your absence becomes real. The emotional supply they assumed would remain available is no longer guaranteed. The certainty of your presence disappears, and suddenly curiosity wakes up. But attention is not the same as readiness. Someone noticing your absence does not mean they developed the tools for healthy love in the silence between messages. Missing access is not equal to building emotional maturity. Feeling lonely is not the same as being prepared for partnership. This is where many healing journeys get tested, because the message can trigger every old hope at once. Your heart remembers the early warmth. Your mind rushes ahead into future possibilities. Your loneliness whispers, maybe this is it. Your wounds say finally. Pause there. A returning person should not be measured by how intensely they come back. They should be measured by how differently they show up. Do they communicate clearly now? Do they take accountability without defensiveness? Do their actions match their words over time? Do they make room for your needs without punishing you for having them? Do they move with consistency when life gets stressful? Do you feel calmer or just reactivated? Those questions matter more than any apology speech ever will, because many people can miss you, fewer people can meet you, and if they do come back, there is another truth to remember. You are not obligated to reopen doors simply because someone finally knocks correctly after years of slamming them. Healing may have cost you tears, sleep, therapy, prayer, discipline, and rebuilding. You do not owe anyone access to the version of you that fought hard to become whole again. Sometimes growth means reconciliation. Sometimes growth means discernment. Wisdom is knowing the difference. There is also a deeper awakening available through all of this pain. Heartbreak can expose patterns that existed long before this relationship. Maybe you learned to chase emotionally distant people because affection once felt unpredictable. Maybe earning love felt normal. Maybe overgiving became your strategy for staying connected. Maybe being chosen mattered more than being cherished. Pain reveals what comfort often hides. This breakup may have cracked open old wounds, but it also gave you a chance to heal them consciously, to stop repeating dynamics disguised as chemistry, to stop mistaking emotional unavailability for mystery, to stop proving yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. That is why some heartbreaks become turning points. They force you to ask better questions. Not why did they leave, but why did I stay so long in confusion? Not how do I get them back, but why did losing myself feel acceptable? Not when will they change, but what in me believed I had to wait for scraps. Not who hurt me, but who am I becoming now? These questions are powerful because they return authority to you. You are no longer a character trapped in someone else's avoidance story. You become the author of your own next chapter. And in that chapter, love looks different. It is not adrenaline every day. It is not guessing games. It is not disappearing acts followed by grand returns. It is not craving someone who withholds. It is not shrinking to be easier to hold. Real love often feels quieter than chaos. It feels safe enough to exhale. It feels honest enough to trust. It feels consistent enough to rest inside. It feels mutual enough that effort flows both ways. It feels mature enough that problems can be discussed instead of avoided. At first, peace may feel unfamiliar. You may even mistake it for boredom, because your nervous system once equated uncertainty with passion. Give yourself time. A regulated heart learns slowly that calm can be beautiful too. And perhaps the most healing truth of all is this: the love you were chasing from them may actually have been a mirror pointing you back to yourself. You wanted to feel chosen. Choose yourself now. You wanted reassurance. Become a steady voice inside your own mind. You wanted consistency. Keep promises to yourself. You wanted tenderness. Speak to your pain gently. You wanted someone to stay. Stay with yourself through every wave. This does not mean you never desire partnership again. It means future love becomes a bonus, not a rescue mission. You stop searching for someone to complete what was never missing, only neglected. One day you will remember how impossible this felt, how you thought you would never stop caring, how certain you were that no one would compare, how many nights you believed the pain had moved in forever. And then you will notice something extraordinary. You are breathing freely. You are no longer waiting. Their name no longer owns your nervous system. Your happiness no longer depends on being understood by someone who refused to understand themselves. You became whole in the place you once felt broken. That is the hidden gift inside this ending. They did not destroy your ability to love. They redirected it back to the one person who needed it most, you. And once love begins returning to you, the final chapter opens, because getting over an avoidant ex for good is not only about surviving the breakup, it is about becoming someone the old cycle can no longer control. It is about reaching a level of clarity where even if they appeared tomorrow, even if they said the perfect words, even if they looked at you with the same eyes that once melted your heart, something inside you would remain steady, not cold, not bitter, just awake. There is a powerful difference between missing someone and wanting them back. Many people never learn that. They assume longing is instruction. They assume nostalgia is destiny. They assume pain means the connection was sacred. But often pain simply means the lesson mattered. You can miss someone and still know they are not healthy for your future. You can remember the beautiful parts and still refuse to return to the damaging parts. You can love who they were to you once and still choose what protects you now. That is maturity. That is emotional freedom. That is what it means to finally heal. Because the healed version of you no longer asks, do they want me? The healed version asks, are they capable of loving in a healthy way? The healed version no longer chases chemistry while ignoring character. The healed version no longer mistakes pursuit for partnership or intensity for intimacy. The healed version of you has standards, not walls. Standards. There is a difference. Walls say no one gets close. Standards say only what is healthy gets close. Walls are built from fear. Standards are built from wisdom. And if this relationship taught you anything, let it teach you how precious your peace really is. There was a time when you tolerated sleepless nights because of mixed signals. There was a time when you accepted confusion because you feared losing them. There was a time when you called anxiety love because it came wrapped in attraction. There was a time when you kept giving chances while receiving almost nothing stable in return. But that version of you is not the final version of you. People grow, people awaken, people outgrow dynamics that once felt irresistible. You are allowed to become someone who no longer entertains what once consumed you. And yes, there may still be moments when grief revisits, a random memory, a place you once went together, a date on the calendar, a dream that stirs old emotions, a season that reminds you of them. Do not panic when this happens. Healing is not the absence of memory. Healing is the absence of captivity. You may remember them and still remain free. You may feel sadness and still keep moving. You may have compassion for their wounds without volunteering to be wounded by them again. That is strength in its most graceful form. Some people think closure is a conversation. Sometimes it is, but often closure is a decision to stop reopening chapters that already taught you enough, a decision to stop searching for deeper meaning in behavior that repeatedly hurt you, a decision to stop negotiating with reality, a decision to stop asking someone else to validate what your pain already proved, a decision to walk forward even without all the answers. That kind of closure is self-created, and it is powerful because no one can withhold it from you. You do not need their apology to release resentment. You do not need their confession to trust your memory. You do not need their regret to know your value. You do not need their return to confirm you were lovable. You already were. You always were. And one of the deepest transformations happens when you stop seeing yourself as the one who was left. Because maybe you were not abandoned. Maybe you were redirected away from inconsistency, redirected away from emotional starvation, redirected away from a future where you kept shrinking to fit someone else's limitations, redirected toward self-respect, redirected toward emotional maturity, redirected toward the kind of love that does not require suffering as proof. Sometimes what feels like rejection is protection wearing painful clothes. That does not erase the hurt, but it changes the meaning of it. Now imagine the life waiting for you when this chapter no longer defines you. Imagine waking up without checking your phone. Imagine enjoying your day without wondering what they are doing. Imagine meeting someone new without comparing them to an old wound. Imagine feeling calm in love instead of confused. Imagine being chosen clearly. Imagine being spoken to honestly. Imagine not having to earn consistency because it is simply present. Imagine a relationship where communication is normal, not a prize. Imagine affection that does not disappear when vulnerability arrives. Imagine peace becoming your new standard, that life is real, but it often arrives only after you release attachment to what kept you starving, and perhaps the greatest sign you are over them for good is surprisingly simple: indifference, not hatred, not revenge, not obsession, not needing them to fail, not needing them to miss you, not needing them to understand what they lost, just peace, just neutrality, just a quiet knowing that your story moved on. One day their name will come up, and instead of the old rush in your chest, there will be space. One day you will see a picture, and instead of spiraling, you will simply continue eating your lunch. One day they may message, and instead of trembling, you will pause and decide from wisdom. One day you will realize hours, then days, then weeks passed without thinking of them. One day you will notice they became a chapter instead of your identity. That day does not arrive through magic. It arrives through boundaries, through grieving honestly, through refusing to romanticize pain, through choosing yourself repeatedly, through allowing time to do its sacred work, through learning what love truly is. And maybe right now you are still in the hardest stage. Maybe you still cry. Maybe you still check their page. Maybe part of you still hopes they come back changed. Maybe nights are still heavy and mornings still ache. If that is where you are, hear this clearly. You are not behind. You are not weak. You are not doomed to miss them forever. You are in transition. A heart that attached deeply often heals deeply too. It takes time because you loved sincerely. It takes time because you hoped honestly. It takes time because you gave real pieces of yourself. Do not shame yourself for that. Your capacity to love was never the problem. It was simply given to someone who could not hold it responsibly. Now it can be given somewhere safer. First to yourself. Then, when ready, to someone who meets love with love. So let this be the final turning point. Delete what needs deleting, mute what needs muting, block what keeps reopening wounds, journal what still hurts, forgive yourself for staying too long, forgive yourself for believing potential, forgive yourself for confusing breadcrumbs with devotion, forgive yourself for every moment you abandoned your own needs to preserve the connection. You were learning, now you know. And because you know, you no longer need to repeat it. There is immense power in becoming the person your past cannot manipulate, the person who no longer responds to inconsistency, the person who no longer sees distance as mystery, the person who no longer confuses longing with love, the person who values calm over chaos, the person who walks away at the first pattern of emotional unavailability, the person who trusts themselves enough to leave what hurts. Become that person, not to punish them, not to prove anything, but because your future deserves someone wiser than your past, and if they never understand what they lost, let that be their lesson. Your lesson is bigger. Your lesson is that being chosen by the wrong person was never the prize. Choosing yourself was. So finally get over your avoidant ex for good by remembering this one truth. The chapter ended not to break you, but to free you.